Hey, everybody. It's Angela Young-Smucker. I am Executive Director of Third Coast Baroque, and I'm so excited you're here. I'm, getting all the technical stuff all straightened out for us today. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much for finding us. Make sure that you follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our email newsletter. You can go to our website at thirdcoastbaroque.org to get all that info. Keep up with us. Catch up, because we're going to be taking a little break. Today is our last episode of our live streaming series, both Meet the Artist and Third Coast Thursday. We're going to take a break for a little while. We're not sure how long yet, but we're going to take a break. We've got some holidays coming up. We've got some, things bubbling up, so it's very exciting. But we're looking forward to taking some time off and coming back with you with some fresh info. I also want to remind you that today, June 30th, is the last day of our fiscal year. And what that means is it is your last chance to get a donation in to Third Coast Baroque during this season, the 2019-2020 season. This is the last day. If you want to get that in, do it. Your gift will go into the books for this season, and you will have made an impact on this season and help us move forward into next season, which we are really excited about. We know it's going to be challenging, but we are extremely excited about the projects that we're going to be working on. And actually, the first project we have is with my guest today, Mr. Isaiah Collier. I'm going to bring him on. Hello, sir.
Hello, greetings.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm feeling blessed. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're keeping it hot and sweaty down here in Florida, just as it ought to be. But I think Chicago's it's
a little bit humid.
It's a little
bit right now. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. But no alligators.
No, not in a while. We had one a couple of months ago. Chance the Snapper,
yes.
Was that his name?
Chance the Snapper. Oh my gosh. Yes, actually, we had a guest last week, 2 weeks ago, David Lee Sisko, who is a Chicago artist, and he's been making coloring pages during the pandemic, and one of them is Chance the Snapper. So if you all are looking for activities during the week, go find David Lee Sisko and get yourself some colors. It's good. I do have to say hello to John Zagos, our board president. He is here. Good to see you, John. We're glad you're here with us again, as always. I want to get right into it, Isaiah. So if folks don't know, you're going to be joining us in September for our program we're calling Generations. And it is our first experience connecting Baroque repertoire and jazz repertoire. And in particular, we were taking a perspective of the generations in each genre. We're sort of looking at the Bach family, both before and after good old JS. And then when I approached you about this idea, we talked about the concept of the Chicago heritage of jazz, both in terms of blood relations of those families, but also that student-teacher dynasty in the history of Chicago jazz. So we'll talk about that program a little bit more, but I want to start off how I usually start off with my guests, and I want to know about your musical origin story. So how did this all start for you, Isaiah?
Okay. The origin story. Well, I am the anomaly child.
I love it.
It's interesting. Most of the people in my family were my immediate family were mostly musicians or musically inclined, and I was the last person to start kind of budding onto the musical trend for the longest. I wasn't too fond of it. My father always tried to get us to he wanted everybody to play drums first.
Oh,
everybody
that's usually the last thing parents want for their kids.
You would think so, but my brother.
That's incredible.
And my brother, who was definitely a prodigy, I remember ever since he was in the womb, he was kicking and trying. And as soon as he came out, 2 years old, playing a full kit.
What?
And so they're looking at him and they're just like, "All right, what you gonna do?"
Your turn.
but and it was interesting because me and my older brother were the ones who had to go through that, but it wasn't speaking to me yet. And growing up in the Baptist church, uh, it gave me an introduction to the music and actually what I perceive and understand and what I actually resonated with. And though there'd be a lot of uplifting songs, for some reason those wasn't the songs that I cared about. It was always the dark minor hymns that you would hear,
the drama,
or the old Negro spirituals that you would hear that just it drew, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. And then as I continued through my journey, I started taking piano lessons around the age of 6. And it was interesting. My parents apparently made it aware to me that I had a natural ear or a natural fortitude for just moving around, but my mind was always very much so it was like solving a Rubik's cube to you sometimes, and once you do it, is it
Okay.
any fun anymore? But it wasn't like don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like I was like some you could put any type of piece in front of me type of kid, but more so ever the natural it just felt natural sometimes playing it. And I mean I definitely, as I look upon my time now, I definitely wish I would have spent more time with it. But at the same time, cosmically speaking, I feel like that wasn't it yet. And I didn't realize it until I got older how much I was searching for the right instrument. And then as I continued, my mom was leading the youth choir at the church, and that would be my first time actually being introduced to singing. My mother is a great singer. She works with a lot of she's been working with the great Darius Brooks and with the Tommies, which is a really great legendary gospel group.
Wow.
And even with
And
singing,
this is all in Chicago. Yes, you grew up
all
in
in
Chicago.
Chicago, all yeah.
Okay.
And it was different. And then even having a chance to interact with my family via the South. A lot of my family from Mississippi. And so to hear the translation of how they would sing and then coming here, it was so interesting. But yet at the same time, I still didn't feel 100% like this was it. And I remember I went to play guitar. I asked my parents for a guitar for one Christmas. I didn't get a guitar, I got a bass. And I'm like, that ain't it. I tried. It did, and I was waiting for it to make sense. And then I remember my brother in the summer, I want to say around 2009, 9 or 10, my brother had got his hands on a Bundy alto saxophone.
Okay.
Never seen a saxophone in person, never. And it never dawned to me that that'd be something I'd be interested in. And so it's kind of weird. Even if you were to hear my mom talk about the story, it kind of sounds like something that you read out of a movie or something. But literally, a piece of paper flew into my mom's face, and it was a summer program right off 69th and Morgan at the Salvation Army Coalition, and it was a summer program called OSMAR. And it was a program that allowed students in the neighborhood, because it was located over there in Inglewood, to actually be able to pursue and learn and study music while having other additional activities. And there I would be introduced to all these different instruments. And I remember it was like so many instruments: clarinets, trumpets, trombones, all the brass, everything. Like you got to pick one. And I'm just like, I don't know.
All instruments. That's one, right?
But the thing was, I didn't know anything about the other instruments.
Okay.
Which threw me off. The only thing I knew was a recorder back then, and even with that, that wasn't enough to equate, to what that was. And then I just said, okay, saxophone. That was the only instrument that came to mind because my brother had it, and he wasn't there the first day that we had to pick the instrument. So picked that up, started learning about the mouthpiece, the reading, everything, and it was very interesting at first. And then after like a good year of getting into it, at first I hated it. I think every kid hates it because it's so. We feel like it should be the equivalent of just knowing how to walk. And we're not that cognizant at that time and point because we're still developing mentally. That it's going to take time, just like it took us time to crawl and to go from crawling to walking from walking to running. And through that, I just started my father, because I originally just wanted to do classical saxophone work. Everything else I didn't really want to do because I felt like it was already done in a weird way. And as young as I was, that was a weird thing to think, but I felt like
I love it. You're what, like 15, 13, 14, 10?
no,
How
probably
old are
like
you?
around 11 or 12.
11. Dad, it's all been done. I mean, let's start thinking
You know,
outside here.
and so then I started studying it, and then my dad said, "Nope, you're actually gonna play in church whether you want to or not."
Okay.
And yeah, that was the face I was just. And but through that though, it would trigger me from that gift that I was shown to have when I was first playing piano. The thing what made me about piano so weird was I was just hearing things and not necessarily, and I don't have perfect pitch or anything. It just sounded natural. It just sounded.
Now, were
very
you like hearing things in your head and trying to put them into the piano, or were you just
Absolutely.
sort of reacting to what you were hearing from the piano? Like
both. It was both. And even with that, it started, and it was just like, it's weird. You know what it is, but you don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
And so all this time, all this training and stuff was geared towards me working backwards just to get back to where I originally started.
Got
It
it.
has been such an interesting and surreal journey because I mean, after that, my ear would start being worked out more because most of the churches don't really have sheet music unless it's hymnals, and so
Right.
I'm forced to get into this. And I mean, it was a time where actually the church didn't even want me to play, and it was actually hilarious because it felt like I was back in the 1800s because that's exactly what happened to the saxophone when it first got introduced.
Like,
They said,
no,
nope,
don't worry about that.
That was instrument. It's okay. No, we don't need it. And I mean, it was ironic because I mean, it also revealed to me, you know, what was the purpose. I remember my father, and even with his upbringing, because my dad was a contemporary of a couple people like, and he went to school with quite a few different people. They all went to the same high school of Calumet. So Shaka Khan came out of that high school. Unfortunately, the infamous Robert Kelly came out of there as well, and a lot of other great luminaries. But you know, that was his thing. He was channeling so much music, and you know, I was happy that I was slowly finding my own path within it. And I remember he always told me, he said, no matter if you what age you at, he's always said these two saxophone players that will always be important for you, Charlie Parker and John Coltrane. Didn't think anything of it. I remember he first showed me Charlie Parker, and the first thing I think most every kid hears is A Night in Tunisia. Yeah. And I heard the Charlie Parker solo, and I just go, nope, not happening.
Oh, so was it like
an extreme no.
That's just not my.
No, because it was just like, first of all, but it was like, seriously, who plays that fast? Who plays that fast?
We can say the same about Baroque singers. Like, who sings that fast?
Right? And so it was just like, it was a no for me. It was an extreme no. And then my father puts on in contrast Coltrane. And what I'm hearing is my first time hearing him play impressions. Now, this was so weird because the tempos are very close, but the inflections, the way that it was resonating was completely different for me. For some reason, I felt like I could understand what Train was saying in comparison to Parker. Now, the only ironic thing is one comes out of the other. So if you can get with the guy who's doing that, how can you not get the guy who came before? But that would show me that there's levels, there's different understandings. Not only that, but we also take in consideration the growth. And I would take my break away from that, and I was like, okay, I might get into that. Like, that's way too much notes for me. And then I remember I discovered the music of Grover Washington Jr. And I remember finally that year when I started listening to that was the year the program had decided to move me up to playing the tenor saxophone because they were like, you're way too loud on an alto. And so that's kind of how, and I mean, it's always funny when people see me play between alto. They're like, what are you doing? I was like, most people don't know that's my first saxophone, the first instrument I actually was trained. Yeah. Okay. And if I had a time machine, I probably would have started on clarinet, but that's a whole different animal.
So would you say like this is when, would you say that this is sort of what started to draw you into jazz as a genre, or was music just sort of music? Was it without category, or was that in your consciousness yet?
No, it really wasn't, to be honest with you, because I remember even when I was at the program, I still had to do classical solos and stuff. And so I remember I was getting to some really fun. I loved it, appealed to me being able to play complicated stuff at a young age.
I see.
I remember that we had played William Tell Overture for the Wind Ensemble. And you know, never ever had to ever learn that type of tonguing, that type of phrasing ever. That's something that you wait to get to a certain established level. But
right.
The fact of the matter, our instructor said, "Nope, you kids are gonna be able to do it. Let's go."
Oh no!
You know, but it pushed us, and it also gave us a perception, because I mean, also there wasn't a lot of African American representation within the genre of the classical realm,
right?
And even though there's influence from back then, it wouldn't be. I think it's the presentation of it, and I mean that also causes a lot of cultural discourse and a lot of cultural insecurity for certain people who decide to practice it. Or there's this thing of that makes you less of a black person or something, and I've learned that is not the case. Even after it kind of everything flipped for me, especially when I started getting into high school. And I remember I got my first gig with my dad, and I remember I got paid $20.
Yeah, man.
But I was like,
that means you are officially a professional.
You know, but if I got, and I'm saying to myself, well, if I do 5 of these once a week, that's $100 in 5 weeks. So I was perfectly fine with it, and I was learning music. And I was getting to a different level, learning all this stuff, and even being introduced to my parents' music a little bit more. My mom and
what were they? Yeah, what were they focusing on?
My parents were, that generation right after, 68. So right after MLK's assassination and everything. So the music was changing, everything being brought up in the 70s, seeing the transitions of the 80s to the 90s and all the way to now. So hearing all the Marvin Gaye, the Bootsy Collins, the Parliament and Funk, and then throwing it in a random warp of NWA, Jill Scott, you're getting all this beautiful black culture simultaneously and hearing it all in the car. And then now you have to apply it to being on the stage. And so that was something very profound, because now I'm listening to stuff on the radio, because for me, for the longest time, and a lot of saxophone players will say you should always know the lyrics to a song. And as I understand the mechanics of the instrument more, the instrument was made to mimic the voice, but not only mimic the voice, but also mimic the strings. These were created.
And there are all these violin techniques from the Baroque era that's talking about, even the vibrato needs to mimic the voice and all of this stuff. It all goes back
to techniques we learned and applied just as saxophone.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you're making some real money. How old were you then? You starting to get into high school yet, or?
Yep, I was just starting to get into high school, and I remember I remember being so happy I got admitted to the Chicago High School for the Performing Arts.
Excellent. Talk about what was that experience like?
It's not High School Musical. For anybody who's young enough who's considering it, I will not lie to you, but I will tell you even auditioning was very intense for me.
Okay.
And it was just, I felt this pressure, but it was a good pressure. I felt prepared though at the same time, but finally being admitted, because I mean, the thing for me was like being surrounded around people who, ideally speaking, should be thinking the same way and feel the same way that you feel about your craft, but in each respective discipline.
Sure.
I quickly did learn, though, not everybody had the same fortitude and the same goals and purpose. And so some people stayed with it, some people didn't. And I remember I was subjected to a lot of how would you say, dislike. I remember we used to have a thing called Freshman Institute. And for me though, my mindset was just, well, the last time I checked, I'm in this school to make music. And so I remember we were being in a courtyard and I would just bust out the horn. And next thing you know, there's like a whole entire giant soul train going. the
Oh
courtyard.
my God.
But
I
I remember
love it.
that was my first memory of the school, and
Okay.
that's how I was thinking that we would all be. I would think that it'd be the whole concept of we would be throwing ideas off each other. Shoot, we should be able to make a movie by the time we graduate. And but once again, that would show me that the mentality, but also only that, but the exposure that people have to certain things is what
Mhm.
shapes that out and gives people those type of romance. And I was just fortunate enough that I was always one of those students who was actually getting the legitimate experience while
Mhm.
going in school, while trying to get the other academic experience.
Mhm.
And
So,
then
and
finally,
and by that you're talking about like the music theory and a bit of music history and
yep,
all of the other
technique,
things
all
that
that
provide
stuff.
content.
Because I
Yeah.
remember I used to fight my teacher all the time because I was just like, you can give everybody else in the room crap. Why you keep giving me crap? And as young as we are, we forget that those people who see, and it's weird because you would think you're in a performing arts school, so the same thing should be applied to everybody. But unfortunately,
Mhm.
that's just now. I won't say unfortunately. I will say that it's because everybody's at different levels, and some people are able to
Sure.
realize where that person is going, whether you realize it or not, which is why they give you what they give you. And I'm saying that now, being a teacher who's giving
Yes. Well, I want to talk about this for a second because earlier we had talked a bit about. I loved your concept of sort of teaching versus educating. Can
yeah,
you talk to me a little bit more about that? So you are now being a teacher more and
yeah.
more. But yeah, talk about your experience with that both on both sides of that situation as student and teacher.
Well, definitely as a student, my main thing was just trying to find teachers who could understand me and how
Mhm.
the presentation of the information was being given to me.
Mhm.
And I know that I'm a conceptual learner. I can argue and almost say every artist is a conceptual learner. That's the only way we've been able to move and make the development and progress that we had because we found a way to apply it to our learning curve and amplify it.
Mhm.
But if there's a disconnect, if the information is not meeting me halfway, and even with that, you look at these things from a psychologist standpoint. It's all about the body language. It's all about how you go about that's going to properly translate. So if you're only giving me from one stand or one view on something,
Mhm.
I can't get with it because you're making it a little bit hard for me to relate. And that's the main thing about relationships. You got to have something that connects. Without the connection,
Mhm.
I can't
Mhm.
do it. And so
Right.
I made it my business to start. I was just starting working for CPS last year, and I had a lot of younger kids. And so the question or the challenge I was tasked with, I'm going through all this complicated theory stuff. How do I make all that complicated blah very simple that these kids can understand it? And then I remember I started using the concept for at least when I was teaching rhythms. Money was the first
Oh,
thing that
yeah.
came to mind.
Mhm.
Money. I would describing to kids, how do you get what's a whole note? And I would just always use the analogy, it's $1, right? You need
Mhm.
4 quarters to make a whole. What's a half
Yep.
note? Just 2 quarters. And mostly because my kids were African American, I could also just say, okay, we go to the corner store. How much does a bag of chips cost? 50 cents. Okay, that's your half note. We don't even have to call them half note. We'll just call them Doritos, whatever the proper translation is, though. But you know what I'm saying? But when we meet
Right.
them, we're giving them stuff that they cannot forget. And so then next thing you know, they're going, that's not how you clap that rhythm. No, 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 because you said it's the quarter note and this is this and this is this.
Mhm.
But like I always,
They've got something to sort of hang their brain on, you
yep.
know?
And as
Yeah.
they get older, then they'll finally be able to digest the adult concept of, okay, this is simply complexly whatever it is. But
Sure.
I believe that everything that is complex is truly complexly simple. Simply complex.
The complexly simple. I
It
love it. I
really.
love it. Um, so I want to make sure we don't run out of time, but can you I know you also did some work at the Chicago Jazz Institute or Jazz Institute of Chicago. Can you talk about your experience there?
Sure. Jazz in Chicago was very how would I say, it very much so added on to my experience,
Mhm.
my exposure to the music scene here,
Mhm.
and just getting involved and really, well, at least when I was around, I can't speak. It's different for everybody, and
Mhm.
especially once again the same thing that people see where certain people are going. So I can't say that everybody will have the same experience. That wouldn't be fair, and I wouldn't
Mhm.
be honest. But at least with mine, I was very much so appreciative that I had people who were recognizing what I was trying to do, and also me being able to find the same thing when I was in high school, finding other like-minded people who was understanding things the way I was. Because I remember my freshman year was just my first time actually being in a jazz combo, really ever.
Really?
And so my thing about my high school was they only allowed upperclassmen into the upper jazz combo. So I was the first lower classman to make it to an upper combo. And so that's when people were just like,
Who is this kid?
basically. And that would go on for the rest of my high school career until I was the senior sitting in the same top combo for whatever. But
Got it. Got it.
they're finally getting around other people who just actually want to get together, make music. Because I kind of told my parents, I said, okay, I had a thing for like the record, and so I used to hate renditions. I'm not gonna lie to you. Renditions make me cringe if the research isn't done. You know,
Mm.
I can tell when somebody's done the homework and managed to make it their own versus somebody who's like, well, I'm gonna do enough of it, and
Mhm.
then, and I
And
mean, I think
you're talking about like when somebody's taking on somebody else's piece. Okay.
it's the nuances for me. It's the nuances.
Okay.
It's a vibe. It's a feel. It's a phrase. It's a style. You can't
Mm-hmm.
play Baroque music and just you can't BS that type of phrasing, or it's gonna be so apparent. We know that that was an extra triplet right there, man. We know that that phrase is lingering. You can feel it. So getting people to understand the art of phrasing
Mm.
was very much so a thing. And that's, I mean, even with me, it was weird. It was never like a whole sight reading thing for me. It was the same thing. I was always listening. So I would always be learning a bunch of standards, but it was weird. I never knew the names of them, but I would always ask. And I remember right down the street from my house, there was the 50-yard line. Every Tuesday,
Uh-huh.
they had a jam session there. And that's when I got my experience. I was not just hanging around my contemporaries or my peers. I was getting my butt handed to me by everybody in the 50 above club. But
Oh
which
my
was great.
gosh, I love that.
And I had learned, and I got that from my mentor, James Perkins. And through the
Mhm.
Jazz in Chicago, I was fortunate enough to receive the Hewitt Wang Scholarship, which gave me a chance to study with probably one of my most influential mentors, and that's the great Ari Brown. And
Mm.
he's worked, and I wasn't even aware. I was a kid. I was just getting. I remember the first time I walked into the Jazz Institute. I remember there was a giant cutout of Von Freeman, and I didn't know who Don Freeman was, and it was kind of very interesting.
I know that name. I know that name, but I can't. He's not in my consciousness right now.
But the thing about Von had just transitioned, I think, a year or two right before me joining and going to the Jazz Institute. And so walking in and seeing the giant cutout, I'm just like, "Who's that?" Everybody's felt like I said, "Who's Jesus Christ?" And I was like, I remember it, and they were just like, "He really doesn't know." No, I did not know. And then
Wow.
until I did my research, and the older I got, I
Mhm.
realized without this dude, there's no sound of Chicago. He was
Mm.
one of the inventors of the Chicago Tenor School. And it was either you're coming out of Von Freeman or you're coming out of Gene Ammons, or the third school nobody likes to talk about a lot is Eddie Harris. And so
Oh,
then
I
after
don't know
that,
Eddie
that's
Harris.
where you get your Johnny Griffins out of, your John Gilmores, and even all those guys came back and studied under the great Captain Walter Diet. So it's this circle, or this tree, and how it just budded out and came all the way down to from Von Freeman's son, Chico Freeman, who's also an
Mhm.
inheritor of all that stuff. So many James Perkins, who's another guy, uh, uh, Ed Wilkerson. And I was just getting my mind blown by how many more people in Chicago that play tenor sax.
But see, like this is an example of all of these generations coming before,
Yeah,
whether
and
they're close to you or not.
I mean that also made me also get a little bit annoyed with jazz history, because I
Mm.
find that it's very much so the word subjective, and I mean I give my praises to a lot of the innovators, or quote unquote innovators, because at the same time they were also equally influenced by some people from their respective
Sure.
hometowns that we don't know who they are. And
Sure.
that's when I had to stop worrying, because when I started paying attention to the people from my own city, I started learning how all these great people were coming here and getting stuff from the greatest people of our city. And so
Yeah.
There would be no John Coltrane the way that he was if he never came and worked with Gene Ammons, or if he never did that recording session with Johnny Griffin, and how that changed him into learning how to phrase. You listen to early recordings, he did not sound the way he sounded at all. But him coming to this, he spent a lot of time in the city. A lot of people didn't know. But him taking and learning and shedding and asking questions gave him a little bit more clarity on his own personal route. Adding other great musicians like George Coleman. And then after that, we birthed great geniuses like the Anthony Braxtons, the Roscoe Mitchells, the Mulhall Richard Abrams, which then creates like the AACM, and one of the most greatest creative organizations on the planet, and just channeling all complete great Black music. And so, but that's a whole lineage that we would not have if we don't, and I emphasize people, you got to pay attention to what's going on here first.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's important. And this is one of the reasons why I think we're going to have some fun as we continue to explore and get all the little fuzzy details put together for our program. There's so much in Chicago that, well, we're still learning about now. I mean, a lot of us, and I actually want to fast forward a little bit to how you and I have talked about this before, sort of connecting Baroque music and jazz. I think, we could easily say, well, okay, I mean, they're both based off of a bass line and they both kind of use chord symbols, and then there's ornamentation, but I feel like there's a deeper connection there. Do you want to talk about how this manifests for you in terms of connecting those two genres and how, yeah.
Well, I mean, I find everything is everything, so it's all related. The question is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And that's a question. I mean, when you look at and looking into autobiographies and reading the works of people and how intrigued they were by their European predecessors, is so beautiful to hear, because I remember finding myself when I was playing. I studied classical saxophone at the University of Pacific, and I remember most of my solos would be Bach, and so I would find myself laughing while playing the music because I'm hearing these 2/5 patterns that I've heard been played within the 20th century music, which goes to show you how deep and how connected they were to everything that was going on back then. And I mean, a lot of people, sometimes we credit Bach as one of the godfathers of bebop, just because of how the phrasing. And the only thing that makes something different between the phrasing of bebop and Baroque is just the simple swing feel, or the emphasis on the triplet being implied. Even looking at rhythm in a totally different light, because I used to tell people, and it used to throw them off, 3 and 4 are the same thing. And that's something I received from my own mentors as well. It's really the same thing. And people usually go, how? And I mean, it's very much so the word mathematical. You can have 3 and the 4 because all you need is the triplet. 4 quarter notes, and each triplet filled within it becomes the triplet, 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 triplet. You need 4 dotted quarter notes to make the 4 and 3. So it's all as above, so below. It's all, everything is literally everything. It doesn't go away. But then when we find out, a lot of those great musicians from back in the Baroque era were also practicers of Freemasonry, which helped them apply things from an architect state of mind.
Yes.
Very much so. Similarly, a lot of musicians in the 20th century were also the same way. But now they were dealing with
the phrase that I absolutely love, which is sonic architects. And was that Ron Mitchell? Roscoe Mitchell.
And with Roscoe, he very much so describes himself as a sonic scientist.
I love it. Yeah, there's this I always love the connection of music and sort of Baroque music in general and architecture. And I think you see this in jazz as well. I'm going to take a step back for just one second. So in terms of quote unquote popular American music, which a lot is based off of very simple chord progressions. It is sort of based off of a bass line and then a melody, and then gets filled in by other things. And it's in this contained structure. And but I feel like jazz is the genre of American popular music that really takes the time to craft so many different layers on top of it. Or it's been the genre that has taken it farther. I mean, I feel like jazz has the expansiveness as Baroque repertoire to me, because the repertoire like we do in the Baroque genre, it can be as teeny tiny as one or two people, or it can fill out to this huge orchestra. And you see these same connections in jazz repertoire, and it can be as simple as these little vocal tunes that are introspective, that are very, very localized. But then you can have all these complex layers of fugues and da capo improvisation and all of that, and you get the same thing with jazz music. And this is what I love digging into and love exploring.
Well, when we look at it from a because at the same time, I always tell my students and anybody I talk to how music is it's a conglomerate subject. It's literally everything at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
While it's not everything, it's still everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that plays a huge role, and I think with that, how we feel in the architecture aspect of it, is also the fact of the matter. I think what makes this music jazz so special, especially as a Black African American art form, is the simple fact of the matter that it is the cesspool and the results of various ethnic groups coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, a lot of people during the slave trade were lost memory of ethnicity. And so the different tribes of Africans that were brought here were forced to do this. Finally, after years of tribalism. And I mean, there's a whole lot that's happening in Europe as well, with their own battles with French versus Italians and everybody has their own beef. But finally, and I mean, this is what makes, in a weird sense, the beautiful, I'll take the positive aspect out of slavery. Without it, this wouldn't have probably not happened this way. There are still present day tribes that still have the same problems from when everybody was there, and they still haven't figured this out the way that we have. But because of the forced introspectives of people and their relations to architecture, each tribe had their own significant way of building. Each tribe had their own significant way of relating to the stars, which also resulted in the architecture, but also resulted in the music. Each tribe had their own phrasing. Each tribe had a special thing that resonated specifically with them musically. Combining all these things simultaneously with the shared inherited experience of pain and suffering gave us this mountain. And I can't even say mountain, it's almost like an ocean in a sense, because it's so deep. Even we can't even say how deep the ocean is. I mean, plenty of marine biologists have tried to send machines down, but the machine implodes from the pressure, because that's just how much more there is. And then looking how we've created a whole new name and different approaches to the music. Now you have your different nationalities from the Caribbeans or the Jamaicans, the Belizeans, the Cubans, the Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and how different their music. Those same people who were taken from the same places have all produced these different wells or springs of different sounds of the diaspora. And when it all comes together, it just keeps getting built higher and higher and higher.
I love it. I mean, that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, and looking at the, something that wasn't there before, that is now there, that is now present, and has given us, this has been an incredible gift that we've been given. before we go, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. Those of you who are watching live with us now, if you have any questions, pop them in the comments. We want to make sure we get those. We have a few minutes left with Isaiah today, so if you have any comments, you want to say hello, do that in the comments. Isaiah, I know recently you experienced some of the protests that were going on in Chicago firsthand. And this is something that has had a significant effect on Chicago and on our country and on the world. And I was wondering if you might just talk to us a little bit about your experience in the protest, and then also the demonstration that you organized with the Black musicians.
Okay, definitely. So yeah, as Angela said, I was present at the first protest that took place downtown, and I remember that day very vividly because the sensation and very much so the vibration was just it was intense in the heart. You could feel it in the air, the tension, the the passion, the love, the anger, the hate, all these contradicting emotions going on at the same time. And I mean, originally I was there as an observer. Unfortunately, to be frank, I just wanted to see who our informants from the government were. But at the same time, I also wanted to experience this because I find it to be so important as an artist and as a person. Even before this happened, my music has mostly been about protests in a different sense, though, and just educating our audience on different things they're going. But now to really be there in the middle of it, to see it and to feel it, this translates over. And I mean, I think I was telling you after this, everything has changed. Even with how we are all going to be playing, composing, everything's going to be changed. We cannot not do anything anymore.
Exactly.
But at the same time, with all that craziness that was going on, I also felt this really beautiful sense of unity. Not only did you have Black people down there, you had everybody down there.
Yeah.
And that's what this country is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about being united. And I mean, I had a chance to leave before all hell broke loose. But at the same time, to just see people running, it was very much so. It was like something you would see in a movie.
Wow!
It was surreal because now you're forced to live through. And I mean, this is a very big thing we talk about. Is epigenetics, and it's basically the genetic transfer of trauma, and to be reliving something you watched in a class about civil rights. It's something to be said about that. And I remember after it, I just felt I had a lot of people who were still down there after I had left. I was with my student, and I remember he just said he went to step behind the pillar to change his jacket. And he's like, "No, run!" And before we even looked, stampede of people running towards us.
Wow! And this was downtown.
Yeah, that was downtown, and even after that, how the police were on both sides. Police fighting the citizens fighting the police, all that stuff. But at the same time, it was also, and maybe this is just the weird musical sadist to me, that I'm just like, it was music. This was all music being played out in a totally different form. Though matter can't be created nor destroyed, it can only be manipulated and transferred. So this was just a different transferred form of all those vibrations clashing. It was clusters of all these different negative harmonies that shouldn't even work for working, but it was weird. And at the same time, you would think you are barely escaping with your life, yet you can think about the music.
That's incredible. That is incredible, Isaiah.
And then I like I said, I didn't really think I would have it in me to want to organize a protest.
Right.
But at the same time, I also had to realize this is our responsibility as an artist. There doesn't exist culture without us. No museum you've ever went to has never not had an artifact made by an artisan. Doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we have a place. We fight our battles differently. Personally, I don't mind being on the front lines in these protests, because at the second protest I go to, I was hoping to be at the back again so I could get away. No, the universe said you're going to be in the front. The universe put me and my brother in the front with the other people who were there, and it was something to be said about that.
Mhm.
It just shows you that this is wasn't there's no such thing as coincidence or randomness.
Mm.
So this was a message I was receiving from the
Mhm.
divine, whether I realized it or not. And I had to just step back and realize, was I going to take it or was I going to allow it to pass?
Mm.
And it answered. And that's when I just said, we have to fight this fight a little bit differently. We've been
Okay.
fighting it with signs and our words, but the thing is,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, all those things have in common is they're all vibrations. They're
Mm.
all vibrations.
Mhm.
The third
Mhm.
protest I go to, I was with a band and I wasn't leading at this time, but I just said, okay, let's flip the ratio.
Okay.
Let's not have the people in front putting themselves on for us, but let's us be the front line.
Mhm.
And it changed, the sounds that were just ringing. This was what we needed at the same time. This protest wasn't just about us fighting the problem, but it was also taking time for us to heal
Mm.
in the
Mm.
midst of this is, and it's unfortunate to say, is it's a war. I won't say it is, but at
Mm.
the same time, you still need to have time to prep yourself. You have to have time to heal and recover so you could be prepared. And
Yeah.
we're exhausted on both sides, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and then
Mm.
on top of that, a pandemic.
Right.
So
Someone had, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
you know,
someone had a really beautiful analogy about this kind of um, this kind of work, this kind of experience that we're having. So many people are trying to survive the pandemic. So many people are trying to make change, um, and and uh, and fight for social justice. And they were relating it to a choir. And a choir, as a group, can sing a really long note for a really long time because, as a group, individuals can drop out, take a breath, and come back in. And I think right now, a lot of folks, whether it's trying to stay home and stay healthy, whether it's trying to make a positive change in our world, um, there are people who are needing to stop for a second, take a breath before they come back in. And so um, I think, what you were thinking about, like, okay, I need to go to the back for a second. I need to recharge and come back so I can support those around me. I think that's incredibly important for everybody to recognize.
just like the body, we need rest.
Yeah, we do. We
We
do.
all need a rest from all this madness. We all need a rest from all the trauma and all the pain. That's the only way that we are able to recover. And until we put to rest negativity, until we put to rest all these racial injustice, we can't heal. This isn't just about us. I mean, for Black people, we have to heal mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. For this country, they have to heal mentally. This is a mental illness with all this stuff that we're dealing with. But
Mm,
also at the same time, we need to be giving off the right medicine.
mm,
Pills ain't gonna can't cure this. This ain't nothing that a pill can do. This isn't something that a psychiatrist can do.
mm,
A lot of people is interesting. I remember I did some research on this. You look into chemistry slash alchemy, but back then in this, they had symbols for describing certain things, and it's interesting. Medicine and music share the same symbol.
mm.
Even before, we can go back way back to Baroque or before that. The Moorish had perfected the art of curing cancer by having the rooms chiseled out to be, or the architecture was supposed to be made to 111 hertz, which was enough to eradicate it. They would strum a lute or a lyre across your body,
What?
and what would be the result would be that sensation that you go to when you're at a really great concert. What happens? Your body gets hot. You start heating up. You sweat out the vapor of the disease.
Fascinating.
The medicine needs to be prescribed in a different way,
Yeah.
and that's all. I remember
Yeah.
there was a TV show I watched. I won't forget it. There was a guy. He was in a surgery operating table, but he
Hmm.
was playing his saxophone during the surgery.
Oh my gosh. Were they doing like the
Yeah,
brain
yeah, yeah, yeah,
surgery
yeah.
to
I think
sort of
so. And
map
I
things out?
and I
Yes.
remember I thought that was the most profound thing ever to watch. Not only was he playing his saxophone, they even put him through the intercom system throughout the whole entire hospital, so all you could hear was him playing.
Ah, I love it. I love it. Music is medicine.
But
Or
it's
can
always
be.
been, and we just have to stop. I really wish people would stop downplaying. I don't want to downplay anybody's um, contribution to humanity and society.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, and that's why I had to change what it means. But I mean, we also have to be aware of these terms that we use. Are you a musician, or are you an artist, or are you a sonic scientist? These are all things because it comes to our understanding and how we're actually practically able to use them. And I mean, I believe every time. I mean, most people who know me know I'm in my room. This is my lab. I'm in here figuring things out that most people aren't trying to figure. You'll see me with a telescope. You see me with something. I'm always going because there's something to be figured out, and we all have the key, we all have pieces of the puzzle that's going to be the solution. We just got to stop thinking that this one piece is the piece. All pieces are the pieces, but when you put
Love
them
that.
together, that's when we can see the overall solution. We gotta. It is selfish of us to withhold certain things from people because of how we feel like they may look or perceive or do things. But
Mm-hmm.
we have to regain our humanity. And the main thing, and the main root word in humanity is also the word humility.
Mm.
People got to admit when we're wrong. We got to
Yeah.
admit we have our problems in every last one of our communities. We have problems in our own households, but we have
Mm-hmm.
to submit to it so we can become, as a whole, the world views it as a righteous country. But what we're doing ain't righteous.
Yeah.
But it's accountability. We have to take that look in the mirror and say, whoa, what am I doing? Am I going about doing the right change? And the same thing you have to say to yourself when you're in the practice room. Am I
Mm.
sounding the best way I can? Same thing you got to say when you're up in there sculpting. Is this really the best way I want to chisel this? Same thing you got to say when you're in the dance studio. Am I really putting on these point shoes the right way?
I love it. Isaiah, that I absolutely. I mean, I think you capture something that we can sort of all hang on to is, the only way forward through all of this is together. And I'm really looking forward to moving forward together with you next season. I
Absolutely.
think we're going to allow ourselves to experiment and discover some really wonderful things together and share that with our audiences. And I really thank you for joining me today. It's always a wonderful time talking with you
Thank
because
you guys for having me. I appreciate this, and I'm just happy that this is to be a part of these first steps of change that we
yeah,
want to be and that we want to see. So
absolutely.
gratitude to you guys.
Same to you, my friend. Isaiah, I'm going to let you go. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll be seeing more of each other soon. And folks, remember, Isaiah will be joining us in September for our very first concert of the season called Generations. And we will be bringing you information about that very soon. So make sure that you're subscribed to all of our things so you can stay up with us. But in the meantime, Isaiah, take good care of yourself. We'll be in touch soon, my friend.
Absolutely. You do the same, all right?
Okay, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure being with you over the last few months, doing Meet the Artist, doing Third Coast Thursday. And I'm just going to remind you, this is where you can go to keep in touch and catch up. Make sure you're keeping in touch. Go to thirdcoastbaroque.org, subscribe to our email list. You can catch up on what we're doing, what's coming up next season. You can go back on all of our social media channels and watch past episodes with our artists, with members of our Third Coast Baroque community. We will be coming back after we take a little break next month with more information for you. But in the meantime, take some time to catch up. And also, just one last reminder, today is the last day of our fiscal year for Third Coast Baroque. So if you want to get your gift in for the 2019-2020 season, today is the day to do it. You can go to thirdcoastbaroque.org to donate. While you're there, consider making a recurring gift. You can become a member of the Da Capo Club, which is a club that is the really wonderful supportive group of people who you can choose to make a donation at $10 a month. And the first 5 people to do that will get a free limited edition Third Coast Baroque tote bag, which is super great. And if you choose to become a $20 a month member of the Da Capo Club, the first 10 people will get a tote bag and a coffee mug, and it's huge. It's like 14 ounces. That's a lot of Joe. It's good stuff. So join us, support Third Coast Baroque, and we look forward to coming back to you later this summer and also next season. So in the meantime, friends, take good care of yourself, take good care of those who you love, and we'll see you soon.